Welcome to Spicy Family Scandals, where real-life drama meets hard-earned wisdom. Today's story is about betrayal, resilience, and the power of standing up for yourself. Let's dive in. I didn't know blood could run cold like that. 1 minute, I was standing in the middle of our spotless kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, and the next, I was gripping a thick manila envelope with trembling hands, my breath frozen in my chest. The courier had barely said a word when he handed it to me. Just a curt nod before walking back to his van. It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't even addressed to Alex, my husband. It was for Mrs. Marina Callahan. My first instinct was that there must have been a mistake. Maybe a neighbor's package had been misdelivered, but when I flipped the envelope over, I saw our business logo stamped on the back. My logo. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the name as if it might rearrange itself into something that made sense. Marina Callahan. The soup was bubbling over, spilling onto the stovetop, but I couldn't move. Instead, I sank into a chair at the kitchen table and peeled open the envelope with numb fingers. Inside was a thick stack of legal documents, with a note clipped to the top. It wasn't Alex's handwriting. The neat, blocky letters read, "Per Alex's request, here is the finalized transfer agreement. Marina, please sign and return to the office by Friday." Transfer agreement. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold on. Property deeds, bank account information, shares in our company, all of it. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in assets, being transferred to this Marina. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred at the edges, but I forced myself to read every word, every line, every clause. Each one hit like a blow to the gut. He was siphoning money from our business, not just a little, enough to start a whole new life, enough to leave me with scraps. And then I saw the name again, Marina Callahan, a name I didn't recognize, yet somehow felt like a shadow that had been looming behind me for years. The soup had burned by the time I stood up, my heart pounding like a war drum. I grabbed my phone and dialed Alex. He picked up on the third ring, his voice casual, as if he hadn't just dismantled everything I had worked for. "Hey," he said, the sound of traffic humming in the background. "What's up? What the hell is this?" My voice was low, trembling, but sharp enough to cut glass. There was a pause. Too long. And in that silence, I knew. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said finally, but his voice had shifted. Careful, measured. I laughed, the sound bitter and hollow. Don't you dare lie to me, Alex. I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back. I'm looking at the papers right now." I snapped, slamming my hand against the table. "You're transferring everything to someone named Marina Callahan. Who is she, Alex? Don't waste my time with lies." He didn't answer immediately, and the silence stretched on like a noose tightening around my neck. Finally, he sighed. "Okay, fine. We'll talk when I get home." "No," I said, my voice steady now, cold as steel. "We'll talk now." He hesitated, but before he could say another word, I hung up. My hands moved on their own, gathering the papers and stuffing them back into the envelope. My mind was racing. Who was Marina? How long had this been going on? And more importantly, why did he think he could get away with this? One thing was clear. I wasn't going to sit back and let Alex destroy everything I'd built. If he thought he could just hand my life over to another woman, he had no idea what I was capable of. I was done being the quiet, dependable wife. It was time to burn his new world to the ground. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry, either. Instead, I sat in the darkened kitchen, the envelope in front of me like a bomb waiting to go off. Every part of me wanted to call Alex again, scream into the phone, demand answers. But I held back. Screaming wouldn't fix this. Screaming wouldn't stop him. By morning, I'd made up my mind. If Alex was building a secret life, I was going to dismantle it, brick by brick. I just needed to understand how deep the foundation went. The first thing I did was search her name, Marina Callahan. It didn't take long to find her. She was tagged in a social media post. Something harmless, a charity fundraiser. I clicked through to her profile. My stomach tightening with every picture. She was younger than me, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair that framed a bright, camera-ready smile. The photos told a story: vacations, intimate dinners, weekend hikes, and there, in the background of one photo, was Alex, holding a champagne flute, looking as relaxed as I'd ever seen him. But that wasn't the worst of it. It was the kid. The boy with Alex's cheekbones and my husband's lopsided grin. In another photo, Alex was teaching him how to skip rocks across a lake, their movements so in sync it was almost comical. My hands clenched into fists. It wasn't just an affair. He wasn't just siphoning money, he was playing house. Still, I needed more. If I was going to bring his world crashing down, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I reached for the laptop I used to manage our business accounts. Alex rarely bothered with the day-to-day details, so he never realized I had administrative access to everything: email accounts, financial records, and backups of his calendar. Within minutes, I found what I was looking for: an itinerary for a business trip he'd taken 2 weeks ago. Except it wasn't a business trip at all. There was no conference, no meetings. Instead, there were dinner reservations, hotel bookings, and even tickets to a child's recital in a city 3 states away. The same city where Marina lived. It was all there, laid out like a map to his betrayal. But the biggest discovery came when I checked our business accounts. I'd noticed discrepancies before. Small withdrawals, unexplained charges. But Alex always brushed them off, saying he'd handle it. Now, I saw where the money was going to joint account with Marina's name on it. Our money. That was my breaking point. It wasn't just about him cheating or lying. It was about the years I'd spent working myself to the bone, sacrificing sleep, health, and friendships to keep our business alive, while he lavished another woman with the fruits of my labor. But if Alex thought he could take everything from me, he was sorely mistaken. My first call wasn't to a lawyer, though that was coming soon enough. It was to Lisa, my best friend since college. Lisa worked in corporate law, and she had a knack for finding loopholes in even the tightest contracts. "I need your help," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice immediately serious. I gave her the short version. Marina, the money, the fake business trips. I didn't have to embellish, the truth was damning enough. Lisa was quiet for a moment, then said, "You need to secure your assets. Now. If he's already transferring funds, there's no telling how much more he'll try to take." She walked me through the steps: freezing joint accounts, pulling copies of all financial records, and locking down access to our business systems. It felt like a war plan, and in a way it was. By the time Alex came home that evening, I was ready. He walked through the door like nothing had happened, tossing his keys onto the counter. "Hey," he said casually. "What's for dinner?" I stared at him, my heart pounding. "Why don't you tell me about Marina?" He froze, his hand halfway to the fridge. For a split second, his face flickered with something. Panic maybe. But he quickly covered it with a smirk. "Marina? Who's that supposed to be?" "Don't," I said, my voice low and sharp. "Don't insult me by pretending you don't know. I found the papers, Alex. The transfer agreements, the joint account. I know everything." His smirk faltered. "You don't understand." "No." I cut him off. "You don't understand. You think you can just erase me, steal from me, build a whole other life while I'm here keeping this one afloat. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" He opened his mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. "I froze the accounts," I said, relishing the way his face fell. "Every single one. And I've backed up every financial record, every email, every little breadcrumb of your pathetic trail. So don't even think about trying to wiggle out of this." For the first time, Alex looked truly shaken. "We can talk about this." "Ho? We'll talk," I said, stepping closer. "But not before I decide how to dismantle every single thing you've built with her. You wanted to play dirty, Alex. Fine. But you should have remembered who taught you the rules." The game was on. Alex stormed out that night, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. I watched him leave without saying another word, my arms crossed and my heart pounding. He thought that was the end of it, that I'd stew in my anger and eventually let him talk his way out of it. He couldn't have been more wrong. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, brewed a strong pot of coffee, and dove straight into action. Every move Alex had made in the past decade, every bank transaction, business deal, and travel expense, was now under my microscope. I didn't just want to dismantle his fantasy life, I wanted to know every detail of how he'd built it. And then I found it. The hook, buried in the spreadsheets and financial records, was a string of payments to a consulting agency that didn't exist, The payments had started small, barely noticeable. But over time, they grew larger and more frequent. They matched up perfectly with the dates of Alex's so-called business trips. But when I looked up the agency's listed address, I didn't find an office. I found Marina's apartment. It wasn't just fraud, it was embezzlement. He'd been using company funds to bankroll his secret life, putting our employees and our business at risk. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the screen, a mix of rage and grim satisfaction bubbling inside me. This wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage, it was a crime. And I had the receipts. But I wasn't ready to take it to the authorities. Not yet. First, I needed to see Marina for myself. It took me 3 days to put my plan into motion. I told Alex I needed to visit a supplier in another state, something I hadn't done in years, thanks to the endless grind of running our business. He barely questioned it, too busy juggling his web of lies. The flight was short, and when I landed, I rented a car and drove straight to Marina's neighborhood. It was a quiet, upscale area, tree-lined streets, neatly manicured lawns, the kind of place where families held block parties and kids rode bikes without fear. Her building was easy to spot, a sleek, modern complex with a gated entrance. I parked a block away, my pulse quickening. I wasn't there to confront her. Not yet. Instead, I planned to gather information to observe. If Alex thought he could pull off this double life without consequences, I was going to show him just how wrong he was. For hours, I sat in my car, sipping bad gas station coffee and watching the building's entrance. Finally, around 4 p.m., Marina appeared. She was even more striking in person. Effortlessly polished, with an easy confidence that made my stomach churn. But she wasn't alone. The boy was with her, holding her hand as they walked to the car, and then, to my shock, Alex stepped out of the passenger side, a grin plastered across his face. I ducked lower in my seat, my heart hammering. It wasn't just the sight of him with her. It was the way he acted. Relaxed, unburdened, like a man who didn't have a wife and a whole other life waiting for him at home. They were a family. I followed them at a safe distance as they drove to a nearby park. The boy ran ahead, laughing, while Alex and Marina strolled hand in hand. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I watched them. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take any more, Alex leaned down and kissed her. My vision blurred with rage. This wasn't just an affair. This was a full-scale rewrite of our life. Betrayal so deep it made my skin crawl. But I didn't lose control. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped a series of photos. Alex kissing Marina. Alex lifting the boy onto his shoulders. Alex laughing like he didn't have a care in the world. By the time I returned to my hotel, I had all the proof I needed. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the pieces of my plan began to click into place. Alex thought he had everything under control. He thought I was too tired, too distracted, too trusting to see what he was doing. But he'd underestimated me. Marina and the boy were just the tip of the iceberg. There was still more to uncover, more lies to expose. And when I was finished, Alex wouldn't just lose his fantasy life. He'd lose everything. I didn't go home right away. That would have been too predictable. Instead, I extended my supplier trip by another day, giving me time to lay the groundwork for what came next. Alex thought he was the one playing the game, but he didn't know I just flipped the board. The first call I made was to a forensic accountant. A recommendation from Lisa. She was thorough, relentless, and exactly the kind of ally I needed. After sending her every financial record I could dig up, I explained the situation in detail. "So you're telling me your husband used company funds to finance an entirely separate life?" she asked, her tone as sharp as a knife. "Not just any life," I said. "A house, vacations, private school tuition, the works. I need you to find every dollar he's hidden." She let out a low whistle. "You've got your hands full. But if there's anything to find, I'll find it." But the second call was to an attorney who specialized in high-stakes divorces. I wasn't planning to pull the trigger yet, but I needed to know my options. If Alex wanted a war, I intended to have every advantage possible. By the time I boarded my flight home, I felt more prepared than I had in years. The anger was still there, simmering under the surface. But now it was tempered with purpose. When I walked through the front door, Alex was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. He looked up when he heard me, flashing me a tight smile. "Hey, you're back. How was the trip?" I set my bag down and crossed my arms, studying him. How long had he perfected this act? How many times had he looked me in the eye, pretending we were on the same team while he tore my life apart behind my back? It was fine, I said, keeping my voice neutral. How was yours? He blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean? You know, I said, tilting my head. Your trip to the park with Marina and her son. Looked like you had a good time. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might pass out. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. You're not going to deny it? I asked, raising an eyebrow. No half-baked excuses this time. His mouth worked uselessly for a moment before he finally managed. You followed me. I laughed, a cold, bitter sound. You think I need to follow you? You've been so sloppy, Alex, I don't even have to try. Do you have any idea how much evidence you've left lying around? It's like you wanted to get caught. He stood up, running a hand through his hair, the carefully crafted facade of confidence crumbling before my eyes. Look, I can explain. Save it, I said, cutting him off. I don't want your explanations. I want the truth. How long, Alex? How long have you been playing me for a fool? His shoulders sagged, and for a moment, he looked like a man finally realizing the walls were closing in. 6 years, he admitted quietly. 6 years. I felt the air leave my lungs, but I didn't let it show. And the boy. His eyes darted to the floor. 5. I nodded, the pieces clicking into place. It wasn't just Marina, it wasn't just the money. Alex had been building this life since the moment our business started turning a profit. Every late night, every sleepless hour I'd poured into keeping us afloat had gone to fund his fantasy. But I wasn't done, not even close. I'm giving you one chance to come clean, I said, my voice icy. Tell me everything, every account, every lie, every detail. Because if I find out you're hiding one more thing, I'll make sure you lose more than just your new life. I'll make sure you lose everything. He swallowed hard, his face pale. You don't understand. No. I snapped. You think you can walk all over me, steal from me, humiliate me? I built this business, Alex. I built this life. And if you think for 1 second that I'm going to let you take it from me, you've lost your mind. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes, not just of being caught, but of me. Good. This was only the beginning. The days that followed felt like the calm before a storm. A dangerous, unnatural stillness that both Alex and I navigated with caution. He'd moved into the guest room without a word, which suited me just fine. We lived like strangers, the house thick with unspoken tension. I didn't confront him again. Not yet. I let him twist in the wind, wondering what I would do next. Meanwhile, I was working behind the scenes, setting the pieces in place for my endgame. It started with the business. Alex had always been content to let me handle the day-to-day operations while he played the face of the company. That worked in my favor. Most of the employees already saw me as the real decision maker, and with Lisa's help, I quietly began restructuring our leadership hierarchy. Alex wouldn't notice right away. It was subtle, like moving pawns in a chess game, but when the time came, he'd realize he no longer held any real control. The forensic accountant called me on the 3rd day with news that turned my simmering rage into a cold, focused determination. I've tracked down most of the funds he diverted, she said. It's worse than we thought. He's been hiding assets in shell companies under Marina's name, and there's evidence he's planning to liquidate them soon. Liquidate them? I asked, gripping the edge of the desk. He's preparing to cash out, likely to fund a permanent move. If he gets away with this, he could disappear entirely and take everything with him. That settled it. The timeline had just accelerated. That evening, I waited until Alex left the house. He'd been keeping his distance lately, probably assuming I was still too shocked or hurt to act. He didn't know that I thrived in silence. As soon as he was gone, I made my move. I'd already cloned his work laptop the week before. Simple, really, since he left it unattended in his office every night. Now, I went through his personal files, scoring for anything he thought he'd hidden. And then I founded a detailed plan outlining his escape. Flights booked under fake names, offshore accounts ready to be accessed, and even property deeds for a villa in Costa Rica. He wasn't just planning to leave me, he was planning to vanish entirely, taking Marina and their son with him. I sat back, staring at the screen. My heart should have been pounding, but it wasn't. Instead, I felt a strange, eerie calm. This was it. The proof I needed. I copied everything to an external drive, then forwarded select files to Lisa and my divorce attorney. They'd know exactly how to use this. But I wasn't done yet. Alex thought he could escape, that he could walk away without consequences. He didn't realize I was about to trap him in his own web. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, before Alex could swoop in with his charm and feigned authority. I called a meeting with the senior staff, something I rarely did without Alex present, but this time, I wanted his absence to speak volumes. The staff respected me, even if Alex had always acted like he was the sole visionary. I laid out the situation carefully, explaining the embezzlement in vague terms while emphasizing the steps I was taking to protect the company. The reaction was immediate as shock, anger, and an unwavering loyalty to me. They were smart people. They could see through Alex's facade, and they understood that without me, the business would have collapsed years ago. By the time Alex arrived, the meeting was over, and the senior team was already working on implementing the changes I'd outlined. He strode into the office with his usual confidence, but the looks he got from the staff told me he sensed something was off. "Morning," he said, pausing in the doorway of my office. "Good morning," I replied coolly, not looking up from my desk. He lingered for a moment, then walked away. He was off balance. Perfect. The confrontation came that evening. Alex burst into the kitchen while I was pouring myself a glass of wine, his face red with anger. "What the hell is going on at the office?" I took a slow sip, savoring the taste. "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb with me," he snapped. "You're making changes behind my back. People are acting like I'm the enemy. What are you telling them?" I set the glass down and met his gaze, my voice calm but icy. "I'm telling them the truth, Alex. That I'm protecting the company from a reckless partner who's been stealing from it for years." He stared at me, stunned. "You have no idea what you're doing." "Oh, I think I do," I said, stepping closer. "You've been sloppy, Alex. Careless. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Or did you just assume I was too stupid to figure it out?" He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't let him. "I've frozen your access to the accounts," I said. "I've secured every asset you tried to hide, and I have enough evidence to bury you if you try to fight me." His face twisted in fury, but I saw the fear behind it. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I countered, raising an eyebrow. "Go ahead, Alex. Check your accounts, call your lawyer, see how far you get." For a long moment, he just stood there, his fists clenched at his sides. Finally, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I finished my wine, a small smile tugging at the corners of my lips. The storm was coming, and I was ready. Alex didn't come home that night. I knew he wouldn't. He needed time to lick his wounds, to scramble and try to find a way to wrest control back. I imagined him sitting in some dimly lit bar, furiously scrolling through his phone, calling anyone who might give him an edge. But the thing was, I wasn't giving him time to recover. Early the next morning, I got a call from Lisa. "The forensic accountant just sent me the details on those offshore accounts. There's more money there than we anticipated, but here's the kicker. He's been using company funds to funnel some of it through Marina's accounts. That's enough for a fraud investigation." I leaned back in my chair, a cold smile spreading across my face. "Good. Let's make sure he knows we're not bluffing." "You want me to file it?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "First, we let him feel the heat." I didn't have to wait long. Alex called me mid-morning, his voice laced with barely contained panic. "What the hell is going on, Sophia?" I feigned confusion. "You'll have to be more specific." "Alex, you've locked me out of everything," he barked. "My accounts, my emails. The company isn't returning my calls. What are you trying to pull?" I let the silence stretch, imagining him pacing, sweating, realizing just how tightly I had him cornered. "This is what happens," I said finally, "when you try to build a second life using someone else's hard work." "You don't get it," he snapped, his voice cracking. "I had no choice." "You wouldn't understand." "Don't you dare," I interrupted, my voice sharp as a blade. "Don't you dare try to paint yourself as the victim here. You think I don't understand. I understand perfectly. You lied to me, stole from me, Built a whole damn family behind my back, using money I earned. And now you want me to pity you. His silence was deafening. I warned you, I said, my voice icy. I gave you a chance to come clean, to salvage what little dignity you had left. But you couldn't even do that. What do you want? He said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything. And then I hung up. The next step was Marina. I didn't plan to confront her directly, at least, not yet. Instead, I sent her a carefully worded email, pretending to be a concerned associate who had stumbled upon some troubling information about Alex. I included a few select documents, just enough to make her question everything he'd told her. A rental agreement signed by Alex in both our names, a photo of our business together at its grand opening, and a copy of one of the shell company transactions that tied Marina's account to the embezzlement. I hit send and waited. Within hours, I got a response. It was short, curt, and filled with enough venom to tell me that Alex's world was already beginning to crack. Who the hell are you, and why are you sending me this? I didn't reply. She didn't need to know who I was. Yet, let her stew. Let her ask Alex the questions I knew he couldn't answer without unraveling himself further. By the end of the week, the tension in the house was palpable. Alex was barely sleeping, his eyes bloodshot, his movements frantic. I knew he was trying to stay one step ahead, but every time he thought he'd found a solution, I threw another wrench into his plans. I contacted the board of directors at our company, laying out the financial discrepancies and positioning myself as the one who had saved the business from disaster. The board, already wary of Alex's erratic behavior, agreed to temporarily suspend his decision, making powers while they conducted an internal audit. It was a polite way of saying he was finished. The final confrontation came late one night. I was sitting in the living room, going over some paperwork, when Alex stumbled in, reeking of whiskey. His tie was loosened, his shirt untucked, a far cry from the polished, confident man he liked to present to the world. You think you've won, he slurred, pointing a shaky finger at me. But you don't know what you're doing. You need me. I set my papers aside and looked at him, my expression calm. Do I? He laughed bitterly, sinking into a chair. You think you can run the company without me? That you can just cut me out like I don't exist? I'm not cutting you out, I said, leaning forward. You did that to yourself. I'm just cleaning up the mess you left behind. He stared at me, his jaw tightening. You don't get to decide how this ends. Oh, but I do, I said softly. You made that very clear the moment you decided to betray me. He didn't respond, just sat there, his head in his hands. For the first time, I saw him for what he truly was. Not the powerful, charismatic man I'd married, but a coward who had underestimated the wrong woman. The pieces were in place. Now all I had to do was watch his new world crumble. The cracks in Alex's carefully curated facade had become chasms, and the fallout was happening faster than even I had anticipated. Every move I made chipped away at the life he'd constructed with Marina, but what neither of them realized was that I was just getting started. 2 days after I sent Marina the email, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello, this is Marina. Her voice was sharp, tinged with fury, and just the hint of something I didn't expect. Desperation. Well, this is a surprise, I said evenly, leaning back in my chair. Cut the crap, she snapped. Who are you, and what do you want? Why are you sending me this garbage? How fitting. Garbage, I echoed. Interesting choice of words for bank records and signed documents. I thought you'd be more interested in the proof of your boyfriend's lies. There was a pause, but I could hear her breathing, shallow and uneven. What do you mean lies? I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Oh, Marina, I said, feigning pity. You really don't know, do you? Alex has been lying to you for years. Did he ever mention that the money funding your perfect life was stolen from our business? Or that he's been planning to flee the country and leave both of us holding the bag? You're lying, she said, but her voice faltered. If you think that, then why are you on the phone with me? I asked. Why didn't you take it straight to Alex? The silence on the other end was deafening. I pressed my advantage. You're just another pawn in his game, Marina. You and your son, He'll abandon you the second it stops being convenient, just like he's trying to abandon me. That's not true, she said, but the conviction was gone. You've seen the documents, I said. You know it is. But don't take my word for it. Ask him yourself. See how many lies he can juggle before they come crashing down. I hung up before she could respond. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. That evening, Alex came storming into the house, his face twisted with rage. What the hell did you say to Marina? He demanded, slamming the door behind him. I glanced up from the book I was reading, entirely unfazed. Oh, so she confronted you. That must have been awkward. You've crossed the line, he hissed, stepping closer. Dragging her into this, that's low, even for you. Low. I repeated, raising an eyebrow. You're accusing me of being low. Alex, you've been stealing from me, lying to me, cheating on me for years, and now you're upset because your mistress finally figured out you're not the hero you pretended to be. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he didn't deny it. He couldn't. You've ruined everything, he said, his voice cracking. Do you even realize what you've done? Oh, I realize, I said, setting the book down and standing to face him. I've exposed you for what you are, a liar, a thief, a coward, and I'm just getting started. His jaw tightened, his eyes blazing. You think you've won, don't you? But you have no idea what you're dealing with. I smiled, a cold, calculated smile that made him falter. No, Alex. You have no idea who you're dealing with. He turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. The next day, I got a text from Lisa. Marina's lawyer reached out. She's freezing all shared accounts with Alex. Looks like the honeymoon's over. I laughed out loud, the sound echoing in the empty kitchen. Marina wasn't my ally, but she was a useful tool. And right now, she was playing her role perfectly. But the real victory came later that afternoon. My divorce attorney called with news that nearly made me cry tears of relief. The audit uncovered everything, she said. Alex doesn't have a leg to stand on. With the evidence we have, you'll retain full control of the business and a majority of the assets. He'll be left with scraps, if that. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Alex's empire was crumbling, and I hadn't even had to lift a finger in court yet, but I wasn't finished. Not until the last piece of his fantasy life was reduced to ashes. The next move was mine, and I intended to make it count. Alex had spent years building his double life, weaving a tapestry of lies so intricate he thought it could never unravel. What he didn't realize was that I wasn't just unpicking the threads. I was torching the entire thing. 2 days after his tantrum, I received an unexpected email from Marina. The subject line simply read, "We need to talk." I opened it cautiously, unsure of her angle. Her message was brief. I'm not sure what game you're playing, but if what you said is true, I deserve answers. Meet me at the coffee shop on Ridgewood at 2 p.m. tomorrow. She was bold, I'd give her that. But she had no idea what she was walking into. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Marina was already there, sitting at a corner table with her arms crossed. She looked every bit the polished, confident woman Alex had fallen for. But there was tension in her posture, a crack in the facade that told me she wasn't as sure of herself as she wanted to appear. Marina, I said as I slid into the chair across from her. I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. You said Alex has been lying to me. That he's been stealing from you. I need proof. I tilted my head, studying her. Why now? Didn't he already confess when you confronted him? Her jaw tightened. He tried to spin it, said you were exaggerating, that you were just bitter about the divorce. But I saw the documents you sent. And after looking into the accounts, I can't ignore the discrepancies. I pulled out a folder I'd prepared that morning and slid it across the table. Inside were copies of everything: the shell company transfers, the offshore accounts, the fake consulting agency. Marina opened it hesitantly, her eyes scanning the pages. Her expression shifted as the truth sank in. He used me, she said quietly, more to herself than to me. He dragged me and my son into this mess without a second thought. Wes, I said, my voice steady. He used you, just like he used me, and now he's planning to run, leaving us both to clean up the fallout bot. Her head snapped up, her eyes blazing. He's not getting away with this. I smiled, a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. Then it seems we have a common goal. The next steps were like a game of chess, each move calculated and precise. Marina's involvement gave me access to details Alex thought were safely buried. She handed over more documents, signed agreements, shared account statements, and personal emails between them that revealed the depth of his schemes. With each piece of evidence, the walls around Alex's fantasy life closed in. But the true coup de grace came from an unexpected source. One of Alex's closest colleagues, a man named Greg, reached out to me after hearing about the suspension of Alex's decision-making powers at the company. "I don't know what's going on," Greg said over the phone. "But Alex has been acting off for months. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know." I hesitated for only a moment before deciding to trust him. "Actually, Greg, there is something you can do." I explained the situation in broad strokes, careful not to reveal too much. Greg, to my surprise, was more than willing to dig into Alex's dealings within the company. A week later, he delivered the final nail in Alex's coffin, evidence of falsified contracts and backdated transactions. The confrontation that followed was the most satisfying moment of my life. Alex came home late one night, disheveled and clearly exhausted. He froze when he saw me sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of documents in front of me. "Long day?" I asked, my tone deceptively light. He didn't answer, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. "What is this?" I gestured to the chair across from me. "We need to talk." Reluctantly, he sat, his posture tense. "What now, Sophia? Haven't you done enough damage?" "Damage," I repeated, letting out a bitter laugh. "You have no idea. But don't worry. I'm about to enlighten you." I slid the first document across the table, watching his face as he read it. Then the next and the next. Each one wiped away more of his bravado until he was pale and visibly shaking. "You've been busy," he said finally, his voice hollow. "Not as busy as you," I countered. "Falsified contracts, embezzlement, tax fraud, it's impressive, really. You didn't just dig your own grave, Alex. You built an entire mausoleum." He stared at me, his eyes wild with panic. "You can't prove any of this." I leaned forward, my voice deadly calm. "I don't need to. Marina has already handed over everything to her attorney. The company's board is reviewing the findings from the forensic audit. And Greg, he's been more than happy to cooperate with the investigation." He slumped back in his chair, defeated. "What do you want, Sophia?" I smiled, a cold, victorious smile. "I want you to know that everything you've built with lies and stolen money, it's over. And when I'm done, you'll have nothing left but the consequences of your own choices." For the first time, Alex had no response. I stood gathering the papers. "I'll see you in court." And, with that, I left him sitting there, surrounded by the wreckage of his carefully constructed world. The game was over, and I had won. The courtroom was colder than I expected, its sterile atmosphere sharp with the scent of old wood and legal drama. It was packed that day, mostly with colleagues and a handful of employees who had come out of curiosity, not loyalty. Alex sat on the opposite side of the room, his usually confident demeanor replaced with a brittle faha out of control. Marina wasn't there. She had wisely chosen to avoid this circus. But I was there, front and center, ready to watch every lie Alex had ever told unravel in public view. The case against Alex wasn't just airtight. It was bulletproof. My attorney had meticulously laid out the evidences: years of financial fraud, shell companies, and falsified transactions. Marina's lawyer had added fuel to the fire, submitting additional records that implicated Alex in using her accounts to launder stolen funds. But the real turning point came when Greg testified. "I worked closely with Alex for years," he said, his voice steady but firm. "I didn't want to believe he was capable of this, but the evidence is undeniable. He betrayed the company, his colleagues, and everyone who trusted him." I didn't look at Alex as Greg spoke. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of the words sinking into him, dragging him down like quicksand. By the time the court broke for recess, it was clear that Alex's defense was crumbling. His lawyer looked like a man preparing for defeat, and Alex himself was barely holding it together. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. They shouted questions, cameras flashing as they tried to capture every angle of the scandal. I ignored them, walking with my head high, my attorney by my side. But as I reached the parking lot, I heard a familiar voice call my name. Sophia. I turned to see Marina standing near the curb, her expression unreadable. She looked different, less polished, more raw, like someone who had finally seen the cracks in the foundation of her life. "What are you doing here?" I asked, crossing my arms. She hesitated, then said, "I wanted to thank you." I blinked, caught off guard. "For what?" "For showing me who Alex really is," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "I was blind for so long, but you opened my eyes. And I'm sorry for everything he's done to you." I didn't know how to respond to that. For a long moment, we just stood there, two women connected by betrayal and loss, but also by a strange, unspoken understanding. "Good luck," Marina said finally, and then she was gone. The verdict came swiftly. Alex was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement, and the penalties were steep. Years in prison, the forfeiture of all his assets, and restitution payments that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But I wasn't interested in his punishment. My victory wasn't about seeing him behind bars. It was about reclaiming what he had stolen. Not just money, but time, trust, and a piece of myself I thought I had lost forever. In the weeks that followed, I began rebuilding. Not just the business, but my life. I made changes to the company, ensuring it reflected my vision, not the shadow of the partnership that had once defined it. Employees who had stuck by me were rewarded, and morale soared as the toxic influence Alex had wielded for years finally evaporated. But the biggest change was personal. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to breathe, to think about what I wanted, not what I had to do to survive. One evening, as I sat in my now quiet home, I pulled out a journal I hadn't touched in years. I opened to a blank page and began writing, not about Alex or the betrayal, but about the future. Because the truth was, I had won. I had torn down the life Alex had built with lies and rebuilt my own from the ashes. And for the first time in years, I felt free. The day Alex was sentenced, I didn't go to the courthouse. I didn't need to see the final nail in his coffin. I had already buried him in my mind. Instead, I went to the office, the place where I had spent countless nights working, sacrificing, believing in a partnership that was never real. The employees greeted me warmly, their trust in me restored, their loyalty unwavering. The business was thriving under new leadership. My leadership. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of the world alone. But I hadn't fully let go of the past. Not yet. That evening, I stood in the driveway of what used to be our home. The house loomed behind me, too big and too full of memories I no longer wanted. I had made the decision weeks ago to sell it, to start fresh somewhere that wasn't haunted by ghosts of what should have been. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I pulled out a box from the trunk of my car. It was filled with the remnants of my life with Alex, old photos, anniversary cards, little trinkets we'd collected over the years. I carried the box to the backyard fire pit, lit a match, and watched as the flames consumed every last piece. The cards curled and blackened, the photos turned to ash, and with them, the weight I had been carrying for years. It wasn't about revenge anymore. I had already won that battle. This was about reclaiming my story, my identity, my life. The next few months brought change, good change. I moved into a smaller, sunnier house on the edge of town, with a garden I'd always dreamed of tending. I took a step back from the day-to-day grind of the business, trusting the team I had built to carry it forward. And for the first time in years, I started saying yes to things that made me happy. A weekend trip to the mountains with friends, a pottery class I had been putting off for years, a long overdue visit to my sister in California. Piece by piece, I rebuilt not just my life, but my sense of self. One evening, as I sat in my new garden, sipping a glass of wine, I thought about everything I had been through. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the endless nights spent wondering where it had all gone wrong. And then I thought about where I was now stronger, wiser, and free. The lesson wasn't about I had been. It was about me. I had spent years pouring myself into someone who never truly valued me, sacrificing my dreams and my energy for a partnership that was never equal. But I had learned something invaluable. You don't have to stay in a story just because you've invested time in it. You're allowed to rewrite the ending. For any woman reading this who feels trapped, who feels like she's been running herself ragged for someone who doesn't see her worth, I want you to know this. You are not stuck. You are stronger than you think. And when you decide to reclaim your life, you'll realize it was yours all along. As the sun set and the garden filled with the soft hum of evening, I raised my glass to myself, to the woman who had stayed up every night for years, believing in something false, but who had found the courage to destroy it and rebuild something real. I had burned his world to the ground, yes, but in doing so, I had built my own.